Fun couple of days for the Buffalo Sabres, and tonight they look to keep it going against the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Darlene scuffle with Krebs at practice, a win against Florida, and a preview of Sabres and Pens. All ahead coming up on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, and thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can also check our show out on YouTube. Sneaky Joe DiBiase on today's show. I am fresh off a little trip to the New York area, Connecticut, Long Island. Got to play Bethpage Black, so a nice little golf trip this weekend. I also got to see the Bills and the Jets play, so cool little weekend. I'm glad to be back at it, though, because I was itching to talk Sabres in the last couple of days, and I'm glad to get back into that today. We got a game tonight. We got a game over the weekend that I'll touch on briefly because I know it's a few days since the game against Florida. Also, this Krebs-Darlene thing, I got my opinion on that for you as well, and a parlay for tonight that I feel awesome about. So all that ahead today on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. If you want to sign up for our Locked On Sabres text club, was in on the text club a couple of times during this weekend, checking in how everybody was feeling during the game about the Darlene hit versus Krebs in practice. If you want to become a member of our Locked On Sabres text club, you can do that by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres. That's where you can do that. And if you got a complaint, question, comment during the game or during the day, feel free, and you could do that. I've got one listener that is the reason why I've got a parlay tonight that I feel awesome about, and it's a long shot, but good reasoning on one of these bets. So that's coming up a little bit later on, though, in today's show. A lot to get to, and I'll just start real quick with what happened over the weekend against Florida, the first win of the season for the Sabres. And listen, no Barkov, no Kachuk. Sabres look great. And you know what? You could say, oh, well, how meaningful is it? You beat a Florida team that was out without their two best players. But I do think after, thinking about it, that give me anyone against Florida, right? The Sabres' schedule is hard because they play a tough division. They have a bunch of games throughout the year against Florida, against Toronto, against Boston, against Tampa Bay. Those are teams you're going to have to find ways to beat. I need those to be wins. You want to make the playoffs, you can't have a losing record against all of them. You have to find wins against some of those teams, whether they're playing a backup goalie or whether they're missing guys due to injuries, whatever. You need those points in the standings. This is a win now mode the Sabres are in. And those games, you could try to evaluate how good they are, and I will do that, and you should do that. But how you feel about the game should really come down to this team more than ever. What do the standings look like? What does it mean to them in the standings? And getting a win against Florida is important because that's definitely a team that if you told me before the year, you could easily get swept by them. So that's confirmed that that's not happening. One play I wanted to point out from that game, and there were a lot of them. 5 goals. Sabres looked like the better team. They had a bunch of shots, good scoring opportunities on Spencer Knight. Knight also did help the Sabres out, right? The Yoki Haru goal, even the Thompson goal right before that. Samuelson, he's laying on his butt. Like, he really could have stopped all 3 of those. It probably should have stopped all 3 of those. Maybe you'd like one to go in if you're the Sabres. To get all 3, that's pretty good. But whatever, they got to those spots, they got those shots, and they earned them. The Greenway goal was the exact type of Lindy goal that you're thinking about for this season. Jordan Greenway, who has been the guy I've been most wrong about this year so far. Last year was Luukkonen, right? Luukkonen, way off. I wanted them to cut Luukkonen or waive Luukkonen but at the beginning of the season. And then he went on to be like one of the 10 best goalies in the league. This year's version of that, I hope, is going to be Jordan Greenway, because Jordan Greenway was somebody that I would not have had in the opening night lineup. And he's looked good. He's looked really good almost every night. He's been very good defensively. He's looked physical. He has looked more energized, I think, this year than last year. My biggest complaint about him is he always looked like a low-energy player playing a high-energy role. And this year, I do think he's looked better in that department. The goal he scores is the exact type of play you want from him. It is nice little pass from Peyton Krebs behind the back to Greenway, and then Greenway traveling horizontally across the goaltender at 6'6", 230. You want him to be somebody that nobody can get in the way of. And there is Sam Bennett in the way, and you can't get Greenway to stop. Greenway starts over by the corner. He ends up across the goaltender's face, and he puts the puck in the back of the net because nobody was stopping him. Kind of like a freight train going through the center of the crease. There was nobody there for Florida that was taking him out. And you want plays like that where he's going hard to the net. And good finish too, right? He puts it bar down on the backhand. That was the play of that game for me from that Florida game. So good win. Devin Levi, another really strong performance as well. Someone that I am really liking to see become more of a split with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. And I do think we're headed towards that. This week also, Rasmus Dahlin gets in a fight with Peyton Krebs at practice. And the way this went down was Krebs threw a hit on Dahlin earlier in practice. And Krebs has done this. The first practice of the year, Peyton Krebs blasted Tage Thompson. And there was like a 3-minute period on Twitter where we were wondering if something happened to Tage Thompson because he went over to the bench and he looked like he was laboring a little bit. So Krebs has been feisty at practice, and maybe that's because he feels the weight or the pressure of losing a regular spot in the lineup. And he feels like he's got to do whatever he can or what he has to be in the lineup night to night. And maybe this he thinks is his way of doing it. So whatever he did, we didn't see the video of what he did to Dahlin earlier in the practice. What we did see from Sarah Holland of Channel 4, what Dahlin did in response. Dahlin didn't just fight Peyton Krebs. If you didn't see the video, go find it. Dahlin, this guy tries to deliver. We know Dahlin's got a temper, if you will. A good one. I think he does keep it controlled most of the time. Dahlin tries to throw at practice on his own teammate. I'm not even saying this is a bad thing. I kind of loved it. Not fully, but mostly. Dahlin tries to throw an open ice hip check in the middle of a practice on his own teammate, and he almost delivers it cleanly. And Krebs would have been flying if he did. And then as soon as they get up from the collision, Dahlin is throwing rights. And then Krebs starts throwing back, and then teammates get in there and they break it up. But two things. One, don't mind it at all. Lindy blew past it. Boys will be boys, right? He's the captain. I even asked Lindy this morning on WGR, is it any different because Dahlin's the captain? He's like, nope. You kind of almost want your captain to set that tone. Dahlin was the one, by the way, last year that said he wanted harder practices. He was the voice of that in the Sabres locker room. He got the C, and he is out there doing this. So he's definitely putting his money where his mouth is when it comes to wanting to practice harder at throwing open ice hip checks and fighting. So don't mind that at all. The thing that it actually made me think about was less about, what does it mean for the team? And is there dysfunction? I don't think there's dysfunction by this at all, but I guess you could have that take, or maybe there's someone on social media with it. None of that's even my takeaway. My takeaway is just, Rasmus Dahlin might be the best open ice hitter in the NHL. Maybe not the best. He's probably one of the best. I don't know how many guys there are in the game like that anymore. I mean, there are not a bunch of Scott Stevens or Dion Phaneufs running around in the league. Those are the first names that come to mind for bone-crushing open ice hits. Brian Campbell did it a couple times, but how many guys are like that in today's NHL? And I don't really think there are many at all. Maybe Radko Gudas is still one of these guys. what's Wi-Fi's name? Is Sheev from Montreal? Like there's a couple of these guys around. Dahlin is maybe the guy. That blast of a hit he had on San Jose a couple of years ago. I guess the one earlier in the year that where you had a guy up on his shoulders is not open ice, but I feel like Dahlin is as capable of throwing an open ice booming check. He's always trying hip checks too. He's kind of the king of it. So that's what it made me think about is, man, you better, if you're an opposing player, Dahlin is really somebody you got to have your head up because he doesn't always do it. I think he wants to save his body a little bit. He's playing a lot of minutes, so if he threw these all the time, he might get hurt more often because of how often he's out there. But if I'm an opposing player and I saw that video, my thought is, man, when Dahlin's out there, I got to keep my head up because he could end my night if I'm not paying attention. That's what that event really made me think about more than anything. All right, when we come back, lineup changes, power play units, and injury updates for Sabres and Penguins. I've got my parlay of the game. That's coming up. And a little bit on the Penguins, who are a team the Sabres probably will be in direct competition with later in the year. That's coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented here on the show, Locked On Sabres, by Hims. Your sex life is important, but your schedule is busy. You don't have the time to go to a doctor's office to get treated for ED. Through Hims, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed. One low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personal ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. Sneaky Joe DiBiase back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Locked On Sabres Text Club. Join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres if you want to sign up. Sabres and Penguins tonight, 7 o'clock puck drop in Pittsburgh. Sabres' first meeting of the year against the Pens, 1-3 against 2-2. The Penguins are 2 points better through 4 games on the season. Now, this game is important, and we'll get to that because the Penguins are a team that is a bubble team. They're no longer the Stanley Cup contender, but they are a bubble team. So let's start, though, with what the Sabres lineup is expected to look like and some takeaways I have from practices and lines and also power play units. But first, injury update. JJ Peterka cleared to play. So Peterka is expected to return to the lineup tonight. Thought he might return on Saturday, given the extra couple of days, but Peterka back in. And if you look at the line combinations at practice, what the Sabres have been doing on that front in the last little bit, I expect that Peterka is going to go back up on the top line, playing with Tage Thompson and Alex Tuch. I have to say, though, I think if I were Lindy, I would like to see Peterka back with Dylan Cousins and Jack Quinn. And it's not even have anything to do with their former chemistry or, how well they played together for like a year and a half going into last year. It's more, I think Cousins could really use Peterka. That second line to me is not producing chances at the same rate that they have been in past, especially 2 years ago. And I think Peterka going down there could really get that line going, spark that line a little bit. Even if they hadn't had the previous chemistry, I think I'd want to see that. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen, especially because I really like Benson on the top line. Really love Benson with Tage and with Alex Tuch. I think it's a great combo. I think their skill sets all fit and mesh together, but we're probably not going to see that in tonight's game. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is going to be the one starting in goal. That's what we're going to see there. Levi, probably the next game, might depend on how Luukkonen does. If he shuts out the Penguins like 40 saves, then you go back to him. But I would guess Levi gets the next game. All right. The other thing I wanted to touch on in this segment about tonight's game and lineup stuff is the power play units. And I do think power play is big talking point right now about this team because they have struggled out of the gates mightily, and they struggled all of last year. So it's natural to wonder, like, what is the answer here? What are they going to do? And then you look at Lindy's units, and they're very well balanced. And I asked him this morning about that. Like, what's your philosophy on that? Are you one that likes more balanced units? Would you rather have one stacked unit? Because you look at the units, and this is probably what we're going to see tonight against Pittsburgh. Unit 1 or 1A, Cousins, Thompson, Zucker, Dahlin, Power. Then your other unit is Benson. I guess Benson at center. I've got a take on that later in the week, Benson at center, but not today. Peterka, Tuck, Quinn, Byram. Those are pretty even, right? They sound like pretty even units. You've got Peterka, Tuck, and Quinn all on the top unit, or on the second unit. You could all argue they should be on the top. I've got Cousins, Zucker, and Power, all guys that to me read like second unit guys that are all on the first unit. So I asked Lindy about this, and basically what I think he's doing, and this is basically what his answer was, is he's finding out what he's got. He's finding out who his best power play unit guys are. He's testing different combos. He's putting in different personnel. Because he did say what he'd like to do, what he'd like to have is one unit that always gets the job done, that is above the others. And because you look at the math of it, he said, I like to have my number one unit play about a minute and 20 seconds. And maybe my second unit comes out for the last 30 or 40 seconds. So for that, you do want one unit that is significantly better than the other. So I think more what you're seeing right now is Lindy finding out what he's got, rather than, well, let me get two good units. That's better than one great one and then one bad one. I think you're just seeing him discovering. Power, by the way, has looked very good on the power play, moving the puck. His shot does look better, but I wouldn't say quite he's still someone you want to be setting up with one-timers. The top unit, the thing that I think you're still trying to find is, can you get a consistent shot on the opposite side of Tage Thompson? And right now, I think Zucker is the guy they're trying to see if he has that. I think Peterka's that guy. Peterka's never really got a long run on the top unit. He also has not been a very good power play player when he has had his chance, but it's been a limited chance. I like to see more time for him to work at that and be on the opposite side of Tage Thompson, because I think on paper, you'd think he's the guy that fits the best. Hey, I need a lefty shot opposite of Tage Thompson to get one-timers, to be a shooting threat. That it's almost like in football. Bill straight for Amari Cooper. And one of the takeaways is Amari Cooper is going to drag coverage away from guys in the middle like Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid. It's kind of the same mindset on the power play. Is if JJ Peterka, if the problem last year was everyone covered Thompson, double covered him, spent all this attention on Thompson because they didn't respect what was on the other side. Well, let me get Peterka going on that other side, make other teams respect him, drag that coverage away from Thompson and over to the middle or over to Peterka a little bit more, and you free up Tage Thompson. And I still think they're finding a way to do that. Maybe it doesn't have to be Peterka, but you got to find somebody that is going to be able to do that for the Sabres. So lines for this game, pretty standard. Thompson, Peterka, Tuck on line 1. Cousins, Benson, Quinn, line 2. McLeod, Zucker, Greenway on line 3. And then Krebs, Malenstein, and Lafferty on line 4. Blue line, we'll see. They went 7 defensemen last game with Dennis Gilbert. So we'll see what we get for a combo closer to game time. Benson, also worth tracking, by the way, because he's been dealing with this nagging injury. Didn't play as much against Florida. All right. Timeout here. When we come back, why this is a meaningful game. Pittsburgh. Why the Sabres have got to be better than the Penguins this year. And that can start tonight. This is a big game. It might not seem like it because it's so early in the year, but this to me is a big game tonight against the Penguins on the road. That and the parlay that I feel really good about. That's coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are brought to you here on the show by Gametime. Hey, if you're if you're off, I don't know why'd you be off today. You've been off on Monday. But if you are, Wednesday, quick drive down to Pittsburgh, want to go to the game, or maybe you're around the Pittsburgh area and you want to go check out tickets. You can see what kind of good deals you could get on Gametime. Gametime is a new feature called Gametime Picks. Makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out all the fluff, show you only incredible deals on great seats. So you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. So check out the app. My favorite feature. There's no wondering what you're going to be looking at, especially in hockey, because you got the glass. It can always kind of obstruct views in a weird way if you're in the corner. You can see exactly what your view is going to look like on the Gametime app. Scrolling through shows you exactly what you look like in the arena. It'll tell you if you have an aisle seat or not. Maybe you want to prefer that. You can sort that way. You can sort through super deals. They have a lot of different ways to save money on Gametime. So check it all out. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and if you use the code LOCKEDONNHL, you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, wrapping things up on a game day, Sabres and Penguins, 7 o'clock puck drop in Pittsburgh. The Sabres are an underdog in this game. Not a big surprise, I would say there. They are minus 105 on the money line, so they are almost a pick'em. You don't really have pick'ems in hockey. It's so close, though. Pittsburgh minus 114. So you are actually going minus money on the Sabres. But Pittsburgh just a hair. As slight gets favorite. It's basically a pick'em. Sabres on the puck line, plus a goal and a half, minus 260. So you're not getting a big payoff if the Sabres were to lose by 1 or win the game. Over under 6.5. The over is minus 105 in this game thus far. So Pittsburgh. All right, what are we getting? We're getting a veteran team, 19 years. Crosby, Malkin, Letang have been together since 2006. That, by the way, if you're wondering, is the record, not just in the NHL, but for all North American sports. That is the record for the longest time a trio of teammates have ever been together. More than anyone in baseball, more than anyone in hockey, anyone in football, anyone in basketball. No trio has ever been together for 19 years. I think the second place was Derek Jeter, Jorge Posada, and Mariano Rivera, I think, was the second place. So these three have been together forever, and they probably got a couple more years, I think, of this. I thought it was going to end a year or two ago, but they're still going. Now, I don't know. I know why they did it. It's the legends of the team. They've won Stanley Cups. They go as long as they want. That's kind of it, right? But in terms of them being a contender, that window is closed. Those guys are great players still. If you look at their stats on the year, Malkin is over a point a game player, and he's 38 years old on the year. Malkin is still a very good player. He has 7 points. He's the one that's leading them by far. 1 goal, 6 assists on the season. Actually leads the NHL in assists very early on here. 38 for Malkin. Crosby, 3 assists in 4 games. Letang has 3 points in 4 games. They're still, there they are, 1, 2, 3 on the points list. They are still the best players on that team. Throw in Carlson, by the way. He's not been there as long as those three, but he's 34 years old, and it's just age. It's just an old team trying to do it. One last ride together. But they just don't have enough. They don't have enough young talent. They don't have enough energy, in my opinion, to win over the course of an 82-game season. Enough games that makes you think they're a real contender. I think they're a good team, but I think they're a bubble team. And the goaltending, Tristan Jarry's fine, but I wouldn't say he's a stud goaltender, a top-level goalie. I think the Sabres might have 2 goalies that are better than Tristan Jarry. So all that being said, this is a team that's going to be fighting for the playoffs. They're good enough for that. They're definitely good enough for that. And what that means is the Sabres are probably going to be around the same, if things go well. They're going to be fighting with the Penguins late in the year. There's a couple teams like that. I think, do I trust Ottawa? Who do you know? Sabres are going to be in the playoff race. If I told you that right now, who do you know is going to be in that race with them? I feel like I know Pittsburgh is, because I don't think Pittsburgh is going to be a top 3 team in their division. I also don't feel like they're going to be a bad team. Versus like Ottawa's won 2 of their 3, but they could be a bad team. They could be out of the race. I think Montreal is probably going to be a bad team. They're currently in a spot early. The Islanders could do anything. I'm never able to predict them. Like who do you know is going to be a bubble team? Devils, I think, are too good, right? They're 4-2 to start the year. Pittsburgh's going to be in that mix. So you're going to be directly competing with them. You want to win the season series. That's my opinion is if you want to have a good chance of making the playoffs and those late game standings are coming into play, you're going to want to look back and have the head-to-head over Pittsburgh. You want those points. So this to me is a big one because of who it is, because you're on the road, because you really want to win the season series. And all these teams, you want to win the season series. There's some teams more than others. You want to win the season series against Pittsburgh, Ottawa, the Islanders. You want to win it against probably Washington, Detroit. These are all bubble teams that I think if you could beat them head to head, you're just giving yourself that much better of a chance to break the playoff drought. So big game, in my opinion. Now, how do I think they'll do? I like the Sabres' chances in this game. I think Pittsburgh's a mid team. I think they're older. I think you can hit them after a couple of days rest with some energy early out of the gates. The Sabres have had some success. They've played okay against Pittsburgh in the past couple of years, but they have not played well in Pittsburgh. Not in Pittsburgh for years, which is not a surprise. So there's that. This is a TNT game, by the way, tonight. So 6:30 for pregame on TNT, but game will start at 7. All right, now to my parlay. My parlay of the game. I feel good about it. We haven't hit yet, but this one, maybe this is the one. Although I will say, and the units are really what matters more here. We're minus 1 unit on the league, around minus 10 units, if you will, on the year. This one could be a big payout. So it's not likely to hit, but if it does, massive winnings. I'm going to start with a leg that Justin texted in on our Locked On Sabres text club. And I hadn't thought of this, and I threw it in on my parlay because I love it. And his reasoning, I'm going to use Justin's reasoning, was great. Let's start with a real long shot of Owen Power, anytime goal scorer at plus 800. One of the less likely players on the odds to score a goal. In fact, plus 850, excuse me. The only players below him, Henry Jokiharju, Matt Grzelcyk, Jack St. Ivany, and Ryan Graves. Those are the only players below him. But this is the logic. Power is on the number one power play unit. So that helps his chances of scoring a goal, is that he's getting that deployment. He leads the Sabres in ice time so far. He's always on the ice. So that's always a good shot. Like, give me a long shot bet with somebody that's always on the ice into that. And his shot does look better. I'm not telling you he's a sniper. He's not some star goal scorer, but scored the first goal of the year on a little cross wrist shot. His shot does look better. So I think those 3 things combined, plus the fact that his odds are so low, makes that to me a nice little bet, healthy bet in tonight's game. Combined with that, I'm going to go Sabres plus 1.5 on the puck line. Get that cashed. Nice little minus bet to throw the odds up a little bit. And then Tristan Jarry over 27.5 saves. This is really more a bet on how many shots the Sabres will have. The Sabres in shot share, percentage of their games where they have more percentage of shots in their games, they're 3rd in the NHL. They're getting their shots. Will they score? It's another thing. But I think they're going to get attempts on Tristan Jarry. And that's really more of it. And Jarry, I don't think is a terrible goaltender, so I don't expect him to allow like 8 and not to get to 27.5 saves. So that's my parlay for tonight. That all adds up, by the way, to plus 2443. So for non-bettors out there, that would be a $10 bet to win $244. If you get Power to score a goal, the Sabres to cover the puck line plus 1.5, so lose by 1 or win the game, and then Tristan Jarry over 27.5 saves. That's our parlay for tonight. Good luck if you decide to ride that ride with me and Justin there. Well, Justin's just going power to goal. I don't know if he's joining me on the other two legs, but that's what I'm going with. All right, 7:00. Enjoy the game. Hopefully, we're talking after a Sabres win, 2-3. Let's get a win streak going here, right? Sabres had 1 win streak of 3 games or more last year. That was a big part of their, season last year was they couldn't string wins together. Let's see that happen here because after tonight, the Sabres go at Columbus, at Chicago. So if you can find a way to win in Pittsburgh, you are looking at a real nice opportunity to win 4 in a row, which, again, something they did not do last year. They did not win 4 in a row at all last season. So here's a chance. All right, that's going to do it for us today here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Talk to you after the game here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.